Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, your ultimate backstage pass to Hollywood's most shocking secrets, banned blockbusters, and the untold stories that shaped cinema history. In today's video, we're diving into 15 movies that were too controversial for Hollywood, but are now cult classics. Films so bold, raw, and ahead of their time that they were banned, censored, or buried, only to rise again as underground legends. From banned brilliance to infamous masterpieces, you won't believe which titles made the list. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that button now and turn on notifications, because we bring you the wildest true stories behind the screen every week. And don't forget to tell us in the comments which controversial cult classic is your favorite. 1. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Too controversial for Hollywood, now a cult classic. Back in 1971, A Clockwork Orange shocked the world. Stanley Kubrick's dystopian masterpiece followed Alex, a charming yet violent teenager, through a twisted future where free will was traded for forced rehabilitation. Its brutal scenes of assault, psychological manipulation, and ultraviolence sparked international outrage. In the UK, the film was linked to real-life crimes and was voluntarily pulled from distribution by Kubrick himself. Critics accused it of glorifying violence, while religious and moral groups demanded it be banned. Even in the U.S., it carried an X rating. Hollywood didn't know what to do with it. But decades later, A Clockwork Orange is no longer just a controversy. It's a cult legend, celebrated for its bold cinematography, futuristic vision, and haunting score. It's taught in film schools and quoted by cinephiles. What once shocked audiences now defines them. 2. Pink Flamingos, 1972. Back in 1972, Pink Flamingos didn't just push the envelope, it shredded it. Directed by the fearless John Waters, this underground shock comedy followed the proudly filthy Divine, a drag queen battling to retain her title as the filthiest person alive. What made it so controversial? Everything, from grotesque humor to taboo-breaking scenes that had audiences gagging or walking out. Pink Flamingos was banned in multiple countries and dismissed as cinematic trash. But here's the twist. That's exactly what made it legendary. As midnight screenings spread, the film became a rallying cry for outsiders and misfits. Over time, it gained cult status, with John Waters hailed as the Pope of Trash, and Divine becoming an icon of underground queer cinema. Once reviled, Pink Flamingos is now studied in film courses and celebrated as a defiant, transgressive classic that dared to go where no Hollywood film would. 3. The Last Temptation of Christ, 1988. When Martin Scorsese set out to tell the story of Jesus, not as a perfect Messiah, but as a man torn between divinity and human desire, he ignited a firestorm that shook the religious world to its core. Based on the controversial novel by Nikos Kazantzakis, The Last Temptation of Christ dared to explore what would happen if Jesus had been tempted by love, doubt, and even the possibility of a normal life. Played with haunting vulnerability by Willem Dafoe, this was a Christ never before seen on screen. Churches protested. Theaters were threatened. The Vatican condemned it. Some countries banned it outright. But behind the outrage was a film rich with spiritual complexity, asking not what made Jesus divine, but what made his sacrifice truly human. Today, the film is seen as a bold, thought-provoking masterpiece, no longer heresy, but a cult classic that dares to ask, what the greatest strength is doubt? For Natural Born Killers, 1994. From controversy to cult classic, when Natural Born Killers hit theaters in 1994, it wasn't just a movie, it was a provocation. Directed by Oliver Stone and based on a story by Quentin Tarantino, the film followed Mickey and Mallory Knox, two lovers on a psychedelic, violent killing spree across America. But it wasn't just a gore that shocked audiences, it was a satire. Stone turned the film into a wild, chaotic attack on media sensationalism. The movie dared to ask, what happens when killers become celebrities? With its dizzying camera work, rapid-fire editing, and fourth-wall-breaking style, it felt like a fevered dream, one that made the nightly news look disturbingly familiar. Critics were divided. Some called it genius. Others called it dangerous. And when real-life crimes were allegedly linked to film, it was branded a threat. Lawsuits followed. Screenings were banned or protested. Even Tarantino distanced himself from the final product. But time changes everything. Today, Natural Born Killers is hailed as a bold, visionary cult classic. Its critique of media culture feels more relevant than ever in the age of viral fame and true crime obsession. What once shocked the system is now studied in film classes and still leaves a scar. 5. Showgirls, 1995. From box office bomb to cult icon. When Showgirls hit theaters in 1995, it wasn't just a flop, it was a scandal. Directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Elizabeth Berkley. Fresh off her squeaky clean role in Saved by the Bell, the film dove headfirst into the glitzy, seedy underworld of Las Vegas showbiz. But Hollywood wasn't ready for its graphic nudity, vulgar dialogue, and unapologetic sleaze. Critics trashed it, audiences walked out, and Berkley's career nearly ruined overnight. But as the years passed, something strange happened. People started watching Showgirls again and laughing, quoting, even celebrating it. It became a midnight movie sensation, a symbol of camp, excess, and misunderstood satire. Today, it's embraced for exactly what it is, gloriously over the top, shamelessly bold, and oddly unforgettable. What once embarrassed Hollywood is now a cult classic, and Elizabeth Berkley, she's finally getting the respect she deserves. 6. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Banned but unstoppable, the legacy of Leatherface. In 1974, an unassuming indie horror film shocked the world. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't just a movie. It was a nightmare come to life. Shot on a shoestring budget in the sweltering Texas heat, this grainy, gritty film introduced audiences to Leatherface, an apron-wearing, chainsaw-wielding killer inspired by real-life madman Ed Gein. But what truly made the film terrifying wasn't blood. It was the illusion of it. Director Tobe Hooper used clever editing and raw tension to convince audiences they'd seen something far more gruesome than what was actually shown. Despite being banned in several countries, the film exploded in underground circles. Parents protested. Critics were horrified. But horror fans? They loved it. Today, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is hailed as a genre-defining masterpiece, an early example of raw, documentary-style horror that would inspire decades of filmmakers. Once too brutal for Hollywood, now forever burned into horror history. 7. Kids, 1995. The film that terrified an entire generation. When Kids hit theaters in 1995, it wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural grenade. Directed by Larry Clark and written by the 19-year-old Harmony Korine, Kids pulled no punches. It followed a day in the lives of sexually active, drug-using New York teens, with real street kids playing the roles. No filters, no Hollywood gloss, just raw, disturbing truth. The film sparked instant outrage. Critics called it dangerous, exploitative, even pornographic. Why? Because it featured minors in explicit situations, and its unapologetic look at youth culture struck too close to home for many. Parents panicked. Politicians called for bans. Some theaters refused to show it. But here's the twist. Despite, or because of, the controversy, Kids became a cult classic. It captured the disillusionment of 90s youth like nothing else. For some, it was a wake-up call. For others, an unfiltered mirror of reality. Today, it's studied in film schools and remembered as a daring, disturbing time capsule. Once blacklisted by Hollywood gatekeepers, Kids now lives on as a powerful reminder that sometimes the most uncomfortable stories are the ones that matter most. 8. Caligula, 1979. The scandal that shocked Hollywood. When Caligula was released in 1979, it wasn't just a historical drama. It was a cinematic firestorm. Funded by Penthouse magazine and packed with real unsimulated sex scenes, the film blurred the line between art and pornography. With Malcolm McDowell as the infamous Roman emperor, it featured political ambition, extreme debauchery, and unfiltered brutality. What started as a high-budget period piece spiraled into chaos behind the scenes. Director Tinto Brass disowned the final cut, while legendary actors like Helen Mirren and Peter O'Toole were left tangled in a film far darker than they'd sign up for. Censors in multiple countries banned it outright, and critics tore it apart. But over time, Caligula became a cult fascination. Not despite its madness, but because of it. For some, it's a bold exploration of absolute power and corruption. For others, it's an outrageous cinematic oddity that couldn't be made today. Banned, butchered, and unforgettable, Caligula remains one of Hollywood's most controversial and talked about cult classics. 9. The Warriors, 1979. The movie that sparked riots, but became a cult legend. In 1979, a gritty, neon-lit gang film hit theaters, The Warriors. Set in a dystopian New York where gangs rule the streets, it followed one crew's desperate fight to get home after being wrongly accused of murder. But this wasn't just a movie. It became a lightning rod for real-life violence. Within days of its release, theaters reported brawls, stabbings, and even deaths. The studio pulled advertising, and some cinemas refused to screen it. Critics called it dangerous, chaotic, even irresponsible. But for young audiences, it was raw, rebellious, and electric, a reflection of the urban jungle they knew too well. Over time, The Warriors rose from controversy to cult royalty. Praise for its style, soundtrack, and unforgettable lines like, "Can you dig it?" What once sparked fear in theaters now sparks nostalgia and admiration. 10. Fight Club 1999. The movie Hollywood didn't want you to understand. When Fight Club hit theaters in 1999, it wasn't just a movie. It was a Molotov cocktail tossed at consumer culture. Directed by David Fincher and based on Chuck Palahniuk's rebellious novel, this gritty tale followed an unnamed narrator, played by Edward Norton, who escapes his soulless corporate life through bare-knuckle fights in underground basements, led by the magnetic and mysterious Tyler Durden, brought to life by Brad Pitt. But audiences weren't prepared for the brutal honesty. With anarchist philosophy, raw violence, and a jaw-dropping twist, the film was branded dangerous, sparking panic over whether glorified chaos and toxic masculinity. Critics were divided. Studios were nervous. Some countries even banned it. Yet over time, Fight Club refused to fade. Instead, it rose from the ashes of controversy to become a global cult phenomenon. Quoted, dissected, and studied, the film now stands as a searing critique of identity, capitalism, and rebellion in modern life. The first rule of Fight Club? It broke all of them and became legend. 11. Freaks 1932. Too real for its time. In 1932, MGM took a massive risk with Freaks, a film unlike anything Hollywood had seen. Directed by Todd Browning. Fresh off the success of Dracula, the movie pulled back the carnival curtain to show the real lives of sideshow performers. But here's the twist. Browning cast actual people with disabilities, not actors in makeup. The story itself was tragic. A beautiful trapeze artist marries a little person for his fortune, then plots to kill him. But when the freaks discover her plan, they unite in chilling revenge. Audiences in the 30s weren't ready. Some screamed, others fainted. MGM pulled it from theaters, and Browning's career never recovered. But decades later, Freaks was rediscovered, not as a horror film, but as a bold and surprisingly compassionate portrayal of humanity, loyalty, and betrayal. Once banned and buried, Freaks is now studied as a daring cult masterpiece that challenged the boundaries of empathy and exploitation in cinema. 12. Last Tango in Paris, 1972, a Hollywood scandal turned cult legend. When Last Tango in Paris hit theaters in 1972, it didn't just spark controversy. It exploded like a cinematic grenade. Directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and starring Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider, the film pushed every boundary Hollywood was afraid to cross. This wasn't just about love or lust. It was raw, disturbing, and emotionally violent. The story follows two strangers who begin an anonymous sexual relationship in an empty Paris apartment with no names, no past, and no rules. But what made it infamous was one deeply troubling scene that blurred the lines between acting and reality. The emotional toll on Schneider was devastating, and decades later, it ignited fierce debates about consent and ethics in filmmaking. Banned in several countries and slapped with an X rating, the film was nearly buried under protest. But time transformed Last Tango in Paris into something else, a haunting psychological exploration of grief, isolation, and obsession. Today, it's not just remembered for controversy. It's studied as a complex, flawed masterpiece of cinema that dared to be brutally honest. From scandal to cult status, Last Tango in Paris remains one of Hollywood's most uncomfortable, unforgettable milestones. 13. Scarface, 1983. When Scarface exploded onto the screen in 1983, Hollywood wasn't ready. Directed by Brian De Palma and written by Oliver Stone, the film told the brutal rise and fall story of Tony Montana, a Cuban refugee turned drug kingpin, played with explosive intensity by Al Pacino. From its graphic violence to its relentless F-bombs over 270 times, Scarface shocked critics and audiences alike. It was slammed for glorifying crime, excessive gore, and its raw portrayal of drug culture. The MPAA tried to slap it with an X rating 3 times. Even Cuban-American groups protested the film's depiction of immigrants as criminals. But over time, Scarface transformed from a controversial misfire into a cultural juggernaut. Hip-hop artists, entrepreneurs, and underdog dreamers embraced Tony Montana's unfiltered ambition. Say Hello to My Little Friend became a rallying cry. Its influence bled into music, fashion, video games, and pop culture. Today, Scarface stands tall not just as a cult classic, but as a symbol of excess survival and the dark side of the American dream. What once repelled Hollywood now defines a generation. 14. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. A cult classic born from controversy. When the Rocky Horror Picture Show first hit theaters in 1975, Hollywood didn't know what to make of it. A wild mashup of sci-fi, horror, rock and roll, and unapologetic queerness, the film was unlike anything audiences had ever seen. With its fishnet stockings, gender-bending characters, and sexually charged numbers, it was too outrageous, too risque, and too weird for the mainstream. Critics panned it. Theaters pulled it. But while Hollywood turned away, something strange happened in the shadows. At midnight screenings, misfits, outcasts, and rebels began showing up, not just to watch, but to participate. They dressed as Dr. Frankenfurter, Magenta, and Riff Raff. They shouted lines through props and turned each screening into a living, breathing ritual of freedom and self-expression. The very things that made Rocky Horror controversial, its celebration of queer identity, sexual liberation, and anti-conformity, made it a beacon for generations. It wasn't just a movie anymore. It was a movement. Today, the Rocky Horror Picture Show is the longest-running theatrical release in history. What Hollywood once feared has become one of the most beloved cult classics of all time. Don't dream it. Be it. 15. Requiem for a Dream, 2000. The nightmare that hit too close to home. When Requiem for a Dream hit theaters in 2000, it didn't just disturb audiences, it shattered them. Directed by Darren Aronofsky, the film dove deep into the darkest corners of addiction, showing how dreams can quickly decay into delusions. Viewers weren't prepared for the film's relentless descent into madness, despair, and physical ruin, especially not with Ellen Burstyn's heartbreaking performance as a lonely mother hooked on diet pills. The movie was slapped with an NC-17 rating in the U.S., banned on some TV networks, and even refused advertising space by multiple outlets. Critics called it too painful to watch, and many theaters hesitated to show it at all. But over time, Requiem for a Dream evolved into something bigger than its controversy, a cinematic warning siren. With a haunting score, gritty visuals, and raw performances, it became a must-watch in film schools and psychological studies, now hailed as one of the most powerful anti-drug films ever made. Once condemned for being too intense, today, It's a cult classic that dares to show the truth others try to ignore. And there you have it. 15 films that Hollywood tried to silence, but audiences turned into legends. These weren't just movies. They were statements, rebellions, and raw reflections of a world too uncomfortable to face. Which one shocked you the most? Or maybe you've got a cult favorite we missed. Drop it in the comments. We read every one. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, what are you waiting for? Join our growing community of film lovers who crave the stories behind the screen. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of movie history. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep watching cult cinema. Only on Globewise Entertainment.